What's up developers, it's Dari here and welcome back to a new video where we're going to continue on with the third episode of our FilamentPHP video series where we're going to build the backend of our e-commerce by focusing on migrations and models. FilamentPHP currently operates solely as an admin panel. This means that it does not handle migrations and models out of the box. FilamentPHP uses the functionalities that Laravel provides. We must first create migrations and models in Laravel before we can use them in FilamentPHP. I've mentioned that I simply want to recreate the demo app of FilamentPHP, so if we navigate to the browser, open the demo, click on Sign In, you will find a couple relationships to the right. We have a tab named Products, a tab named Customers. A customer can order a product, which will be stored inside the Orders tab, where we have two additional tabs, which is Categories, and I'm assuming that one product can have multiple categories, and finally we have the Brands, which is associated to one product. So let's navigate to the CLI for a moment. And let's create our model and migrations. The order of the migration does matter, as migrations are executed in the order they were created. If a migration depends on a table or column created in the previous migration, it is important to ensure that the previous migration has been executed before running the dependent migration. So for our example, we have to start with the category model and migration. So let's say PHP artisan, make me a new model. Let's name it category and let's add a -m flag to it. Let's hit enter. Let's hit the arrow up and let's replace the category model with the brand model. The order migration needs to be created after the products and customers model because the relationship depends on those. So let's say PHP artisan, make me a new model. Let's name it product-m. Let's hit the arrow up again and let's replace product with customer. Now let me perform a clear right here. Finally, we need to create the order, model, and migration. So let's hit the arrow up and let's replace product with order. Alright, let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Inside the side panel, let's open the database directory, migrations directory, where we're going to start off with our first migration, which is the categories table. We're going to keep the primary key of ID as well as the timestamps, and in between, we're going to use our table object. We're going to create a string, so a varchar with the name of name. Then on the line below, we're going to use our table object again. We're going to create a string, which will be the slug, and the slug needs to be unique. Then we're going to create a column where the type method is a foreign ID. So let's say table foreign ID, which creates a new column in the table to store a foreign key. In our current example, we're going to create a parent_ID column that references the ID column of the categories table. We're going to chain a couple methods to it, where the first one will be the nullable method, which allows the column to be null. Then we're going to chain the constraint method to it, which sets the foreign key constraint to reference the categories table. So we need to pass in a string right here of the table name, which will be categories. Finally, we're going to chain one more method to it, which will be the cascade on delete method, which will specify that when a category is deleted, all categories that reference it as a parent should also be deleted. Now let's add two more columns right here. Let's use our table object and let's create a boolean with a column name of is_visible, and it has a default value of, let's say, false. We need one more, which will be our table. We're going to create a long text with a column name of description, and this can be null as well. This will be it for our categories table. So let's open our brands migration. And once again, we're going to keep our ID and we're going to keep our timestamps. And in between, we're going to create a table string with the name of name. We need a slug as well. So let's say table string slug, which needs to be unique. Then a brand has its own website URL. So let's create a new string where we will pass in the name of URL, and the URL can be nullable. Now I also want to save the color of a brand as a primary hex color. MySQL does not support a field where you can store a hex color. Well, it does as a string. So let's create another string with the name of primary_color. underscore hex, where we will simply add a string value. This field can also be nullable. Now I want to add a boolean right here. So let's say boolean with a name of is underscore visible. And this has a default value of false. Now a brand can have a description as well. So let's create that one as well. So let's say description, and it can be nullable. All right, let's open the next migration, which will be for the products table. And I'm going to have an in-depth products table as the example of FilamentPHP, since most of the fields are text fields, and I will be repeating myself every single time in the demo. The process on video should not take too long. So I'm skipping fields such as a compare at price, cost per item, barcode, security lock, and so on. Right below our primary key, we're going to define a foreign key with the column name of brand underscore ID. We're going to constrain it on the table brands, and we're going to chain the cascade on delete methods to it. And let me actually outline it on the line below. Now, what does a product have? Well, a product obviously has a name and slug. So let's say table, string, now let's say name. It has a string with the name of slug, which should be, once again, unique. Then a product has a SKU, which stands for stock keeping unit, and the value can consist of letters and integers. So let's say table, string, SKU, just like the primary key, unique. Then we need to add a description for our product. So let's say table, long text, description, with the value of nullable. We need to add the quantity of a product, which we will use the unsigned big integer method for, with the name of quantity. Then we need to define the price of the product, which will be a decimal. Then I want to add a table boolean, which will be the is visible column, and it has a default value of false. And I'm going to add one more boolean. So let's say table boolean with a column name of is featured. And I'm going to change the default value. And obviously not all products are featured by default. So let's pass in a false value. Now the products in our application can have two types. It can be a deliverable product or a downloadable product. And the way I'm going to define this is through my table object. I'm going to create a new enum where the column name will be type, where I'm going to pass a second argument of an array with the values for my type column. So the first one will be deliverable, while the second one will be downloadable. I'm going to add a default value right here of deliverable. Now the last column that I want to add is a date column with a column name of published underscore at. All right, now let's open our customers migration. And in between the primary key and timestamps, we're going to add a column, which is a string with a column name of name. And we're going to use our table string again, which will be the email of the customer, which needs to be unique. Then I'm going to use a string method again, because I need the phone number of a user. I'm going to use the table object to create a new date, which will be the date of birth. Then I need the address of a user, which will be a string. I need the zip code of the user. So let's say table string zip code. And finally, I need the city. I actually forgot one thing, and that was defining the enum that we have defined inside our products migration. Now let's create a new directory inside our app directory. And let's name it enums. And inside our enums directory, we're going to create a new file with the name of product type enum.php. Now, the first thing that we need to do inside a new PHP file is defining the opening tag. We're going to define the namespace, which will be app/enums. Then we're going to define the enum by defining the keyword enum, followed with the name of our enum, which will be the same as the file. So let's say product type enum. We're going to type int it to a string, where in here we need to define two cases. Case number one will be deliverable in all capitals, which is a string of deliverable. And the second case is downloadable. downloadable, which will have a value of downloadable in lower cases. All right, now let's open our last migration, which is for the orders table. And we're going to define a foreign key constraint again, which will be the customer underscore ID. It is constrained on the table customers. And we're going to chain the cascade on delete method to it. Now the order has a unique number, so let's define a table string with a column name of number, and it needs to be unique. It has a total price column, which will be a decimal. So let's say total price 10 and 2. It has another column which defines the status, which is an enum of the values pending, processing, completed, and declined. So let's say table enum. It is the status. We're going to pass in an array with the values of pending, processing, completed, declined, and it has a default, well, let me align it on the line below, of pending. Now we're almost done because we need a column for the shipping price. So let's say table, decimal. The column name is shipping underscore price, and it can be nullable because a product can be downloadable as well. So 2 more columns. We have a table long text, which will have a column name of notes. And we have a table soft deletes. There are 2 things that we need to do for the orders table. We need to create our enum, and we need to make sure that we enable the soft deletes trait on our order model. Well, I actually need to do 3 things because I have a small typo right here. All right. Now let's scroll up. Let's create a new enum class. Let's name it order status enum.php. Let's create the opening PHP tag. Let's add a namespace of app/enums. We're going to define our enum named order status enum, and we're going to type into it a string. We have case number 1, which is pending, which has a value of a string pending. We have case number 2, which will be processing, which has a value of a string processing. Case number 3 is called completed, which has a value of a string completed. And finally, we have case number 4, which is declined, which we need to set equal to a string of declined. All right, now let's open our models directory, and let's open our product model. And let's open our order model. So let's add a comma right after the has factory trait, and let's name it soft deletes. Now we're obviously not done. We still need to define the fillable property on all of our models, and we need to define all the relationships as well. Let's start off with the fillable properties on our models from top to bottom. Now, quick note, I know that you can use the guarded property as well, but I personally prefer to use the fillable property over the guarded property because it provides more explicit control over which fields can be mass assigned. With guarded, any field not listed in the array can be mass assigned, which can lead to potential security vulnerabilities. On the other hand, with fillable, only the listed fields can be mass assigned, providing more security and control. In case you want to use the guarded property, it's completely up to you since it won't affect what we're going to do. But for now, let's open our brand model, and right below our trait, we're going to define our protected fillable property, which we're going to set equal to an array, where we need to pass in a couple column names. So let's say name, we have the slug, we have the URL, we have the primary underscore hex, we have the is visible Boolean, and we have the description. Now let's move on to our second model, which is the category model. So let's define the protected fillable again, where we're going to pass in the columns, name, slug, parent underscore ID, is visible, and the description. Then we have the customer model, which has a protected fillable property defined again, with quite a lot of values. So let's say name, email, phone number, phone, the date of birth, we have the address, we have the zip underscore code, and we have the city. Let's open our order model, which has a protected fillable property, which you have guessed already, with the values of customer underscore ID, the number, the total underscore price, the status, the shipping underscore price, and the notes. Finally, we have the product model. So let's define the protected fillable property. Let's pass in the brand underscore ID, the name, the slug, the SKU, the description, and I want to double check whether I forgot one column. Let's open the products table, and I have actually forgot it, which will be added right below the SKU, which will be a table string of image, which will be the image of the product. So inside our, let's say, product model, we're gonna add the image, quantity, the price, is visible, is featured, the type, and the published underscore at. Alright, the final configuration is the relationships between our models. So let's close off all files that we have open, and let's open our brand model. So I'm going to work from top to bottom again. Since one product has one brand, a brand can have multiple products, right? So let's define the first relationship. Let's say product function brands. Well, let's type into it to a has many. Now let's return this has many, and what it has is a product : class. And that's it. Now let's move on to our second model, which is the category model. Well, we said that it can have a relationship with itself, right? It has a parent ID column, which can be nullable. So let's define a public function parent. Let's return this belongs to, and what it belongs to is a category class. But we also need to define the foreign key, which will be parent underscore ID. Let's type into it to a belongs to. And since a category can have a parent as well, it should also have a child. So let's define a public function child, where the child needs to return this has many, and it has many categories as well, where the foreign key is parent underscore ID as well. And let's type into it to a has many. Now we're not done here, because we need to define one more relationship. And since a product is associated with one category can have multiple products attached to it. So let's define that relationship as well. Let's say public function products, and let's return this belongs to many. I made a typo, and it belongs to the product model. Now let's type into it to a belongs to many. All right. Now the customer model has no relationships for now, but what about our order model? Well, we have only defined one relationship in it, which is the relationship with the customers table, since one order is made by one user. So let's define a new public function customer, so singular, and let's return this belongs to. And where it belongs to is the customer class. Now let's type into it to a belongs to, and that's it. Now, do you think that we're ready? Well, we actually missed one, on purpose, obviously. One order can have many products, while a product can only be attached to one order. So we need to define the one-to-many relationship. So let's see how we need to define that. Let's go right below our customer function, and let's define a public function items method. What we're going to do right here is basically return this has many. And we haven't defined what we need to pass in, so let's type into it quickly to a has many. So what about the argument inside the has many method? What I recommend right here is making an order item model, which will define the order ID, product ID, the quantity, and the unit price. So let's navigate to the CLI. And let's say PHP artisan, make me a new model, and let's name it order item, and we're going to add the -m flag to it. Now let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's open the recently created migration, where we're going to define a foreign key. So let's say table, foreign ID. The foreign ID will have a name of order underscore ID. We're going to chain the constraint method to it, and it constrains the table orders. and we're going to chain the cascade on delete method. Then we need to define a second foreign key. So let's say table foreign ID. The foreign ID will be product underscore ID. We're going to chain the constraint method to it with the name of products. And we're going to chain one more method named cascade on delete. Now we need to add two more columns, where the first one will be a table unsigned big integer of quantity. And we're going to define a table decimal for the unit price. Now let's open our newly created order item model, where we first need to define our protected fillable property, where we're going to set the order ID, we're going to set the product ID, we're going to set the quantity, and the unit underscore price. We don't need to define a relationship inside our order item model, since the relationship needs to be defined inside the order model. And well, we have defined the method, so the only thing we need to do right here is passing in the order item model and the class. I think that we have one model left, which is the product model. So which relationships do we have right here? Well, one product is associated with one particular brand. So let's define a new public function brand. So a singular brand, where we're going to return this belongs to. And it belongs to the brand model. Let's type int it to a belongs to. All right. Now, does it have more? Well, it does have one more relationship, which is between the product and category model, where one product can have many categories, but one category can have many products as well. So we need to define a pivot table between the product and category model. So let's navigate to the CLI for one more time, and let's define a PHP artisan make me a new migration command. Let's name it create underscore category underscore product underscore table. All right, now let's define it by navigating back to PHP Storm, opening our migration, and we don't need the primary key for our pivot table, and we also don't need the timestamps. So let's define two foreign keys for the category ID and the product ID. So let's say table foreign ID. The foreign ID is the category underscore ID. It is constrained on the table categories, and it needs to be cascade on delete. Now one more, which is the name of product underscore ID. It is constrained on the table products, and it is also a cascade on delete. Now let's define one more relationship inside our product model, which is the public function categories. Like I've said, this is a many-to-many relationship, so let's return this belongs to many, and it belongs to many categories. Let's type int it to a belongs to many, and I want to chain one more method to the belongs to many method, which is the with timestamps. The with timestamps method adds the created underscore add and the updated underscore add timestamps to the pivot table that connects the product and category model. This allows for tracking when the relationship was created or updated. Now there's one more thing left, and that's navigating to the CLI and performing the PHP artisan migrate command. And as you can see, it has migrated all the migrations that we have created in this episode. For now, I want to wrap up this video where we have created our migrations and models for the products, customers, orders, categories, and brands tables. In the next episode, we're going to build our FilamentPHP resource for the CRUD operations for the products table. Now this was it for today's video. If you enjoyed the content and you want to see more, give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.